Welcome to Legends in Leadership, brought to you by ISF and the Carrington Group. Legends in Leadership is an inspirational podcast featuring the stories of leaders who are making a difference. Our goal is to inspire you with the stories of leaders who come from humble beginnings, overcome challenges, and ultimately rise up to make a difference in people's lives.
Hello and welcome back to Legends in Leadership. This is Jason Smith. I'm a family officer with the Carrington Group, and here with my co-host on today's podcast, Dr. Blair Ritchie, Executive Director of ISF. Good morning.
Hey, good morning, Jason.
Well, as we do every week, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Blair for our leadership trivia, a story of a leader who has overcome challenges from humble beginnings to make a difference in the world and community around them. So, Dr. Blair, who do we have today?
Well, listen, my wife is a NASA geek, and this is the 50th anniversary of the lunar landing, and so lots of going on around NASA these days. And so I thought I'd pick out a great story of a legendary leader who was the command module pilot of the first Apollo mission that actually entered lunar orbit. His father was killed in a car accident when he was just 5 years old, so he was raised by a single mom. Joined the Boy Scouts of America, where he developed this fascination with rocketry. And after graduating from high school, he was accepted into the Flying Midshipman program, became a Navy test pilot. Always intrigued by guys that want to be a test pilot. But those are the guys that became astronauts. And so he was selected as a NASA astronaut. And it was Christmas of 1968. Crew of Apollo 8 beamed back pictures of the moon and the Earth. And if you recall that, you're probably too young, but mesmerized the world as they read the creation story from the book of Genesis. Fascinating moment in history. The astronaut's most famous flight, however, never reached its destination. He was part of the legendary Apollo 13 crew, whose mission was disrupted by an electrical fire that disabled the craft. And the safe return of the Apollo 13 crew may have been NASA's finest hour, right up there with landing someone on the lunar surface. So who's the legendary leader? I'll be back at the end of the show with today's answer.
Great. Well, I'm excited to have our guest today, Michael Welch, who's involved in an industry that's emerging, that's growing, that's figuring itself out to many degrees in the hemp CBD space. Michael joined the company in January of 2016 as Chief Financial Officer and was appointed President and CEO in February of 2016. He brings more than 30 years of executive and financial experience to Rocky Mountain High brands. In the late 90s, Mr. Welch was part of the founders group of Resource Global Professionals, a publicly traded international consulting firm. Prior to that, for more than 10 years, he was employed by Landmark Land Company, a publicly traded multi-state real estate developer, and just a variety of experiences in the financial world, a variety of companies. And today he serves on the board of directors of the U.S. Hemp Roundtable and is also a member of the Dallas chapter of Financial Executives International. So welcome to the show, Michael.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Yeah, we're excited to dive into the details of what you're doing today. But first, as a leadership show, wanted to explore some of the influences in your life as you developed as a person and in your career, and just wanted to turn back the clock a little bit and hear about your upbringing and what was an early influence for you as you developed your leadership qualities and characteristics.
So I grew up in Norman, Oklahoma. My father actually died when I was 12 years old. We lived in Knoxville, Tennessee. My mother and I moved to Norman, Oklahoma because she had two sisters that lived in Norman, and the University of Oklahoma was there. So she wanted me to be able to go to college in Norman. And it was a great place to grow up. It was a college town. It was a small town just south of Oklahoma City. And there were several influencers in my life. One of them was my best friend's father, who was a court recorder for Judge Bohannon in Oklahoma City. He worked in the federal building that was bombed
Oh, wow.
during the Reagan administration, and he was quite a gentleman. He taught me a lot. He was sort of a surrogate father figure since I had lost my father at a young age, and he basically took me under his wing and taught me a lot about both business and cars. He was a car freak, and he was always buying and selling used cars, and I picked up the car bug from him. I don't trade cars as frequently as he did, but I'm always like, the auto show's in town, and I'm just itching to go see it. So he was an early influencer on my life, I would say.
Sure. So that's a critical time. Obviously, at any time to lose a parent, it can be obviously hard. But at that age range, what were some of the things that you feel he imparted upon you, even at that younger age, that have helped you through your life?
To always treat people with respect, and to develop good manners, and to make good grades, and to try really hard in school, and to really work on accomplishing your goals, and to decide what career to go into to be successful in life.
Yeah. So did you wind up going to school there in
I
Norman?
did.
All right.
I graduated from the University of Oklahoma with exactly 128 hours, which was the minimum you could graduate with. So it was a great experience. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. So you had some incredibly varied experiences throughout your career. Where did you get your start professionally?
I started with Deloitte here in Dallas on the audit staff, and that has served me well because the audit training and audit experience that I got with Deloitte was something that has helped me all through my career in terms of being able to investigate different things and look for source documentation and understanding the importance of being able to trace something back to its original source documents.
Yeah.
So it was a great experience, and I'm really glad that I did that. I left there and got into private industry with a company called Computer Language Research, or its trade name was FastTax, and that was the first company that had developed computerized tax returns.
Okay.
The founder of that company actually worked with Xerox on the laser printing technology that we now take for granted.
Yeah, everywhere. Yeah.
So it was an interesting time, and it was an interesting time to work for a company like that because when I first went there, they had a warehouse full of Kodak copiers, and they had this form system so that all the tax returns were printed on continuous white paper with a pull sheet at the front of them. And literally there were hundreds of workers that would take the pull sheet and go to the form bins and copy the continuous white paper onto the tax forms.
Wow.
That's where we've come from.
Wow.
So you know where we are now, where tax returns are filed electronically.
Sure.
So it's a major step forward. So.
Yes.
I'm intrigued because your journey through the financial side of business, the CFO side, now sitting in a CEO seat, that's a leadership interesting transition. Talk a little bit about that journey from that side into a leader, more executive leadership position that you currently hold.
Well, I joined Rocky Mountain High Brands in January of 2016 as the CEO, and the former chairman of the board had decided shortly after I joined the company that it was time to part ways with the CEO that was there when I had joined the company. And a few weeks into that, we started having the discussion about me actually in a dual role of CFO and CEO. The first project that I worked on for the company was filing a Form 10 for the company and taking it from a pink sheet public company on the OTC markets, which is, if you're familiar with public companies, pink sheet is sort of the lowest common denominator of a public company. If you watch The Wolf of Wall Street, there's sort of a really good analogy of a pink sheet company where he goes, they show somebody in a garage.
Yeah.
Sort of is indicative of pink sheet companies. So pink sheet companies sort of have a certain stigma to them.
Mm-hmm.
So I worked on the Form 10, filed the Form 10, and got us through the Form 10 process, which took us to becoming an SEC registrant in what's called a fully reporting company. And then we moved to the OTCQB, which is the next level up in the OTC markets. Mm-hmm. And during that process, I moved into the CEO role. So I was actually doing dual duty. I had worked with an individual who was a former audit partner at Deloitte, and he was in transition and worked for another small cap public company, and I was able to bring him over as our CFO. So we're very fortunate as a small public company to have a former SEC audit partner from Deloitte as our CFO.
Sure.
Very fortunate. And so we brought him over, and it freed me up to really concentrate on the CEO role within the company. And it's been a great transition with our team. The chairman left in June of 2017, and we've had many changes and many challenges in the company since then. And we are now in the position where we've brought in a new vice president of sales. We're rolling out 7 new SKUs of hemp seed extract drinks, and we're working on a national distribution contract with the largest liquor, beer, and wine distributor, whose name I can't say yet, for national distribution of our drinks. And so we're very excited about that. It will give us a retail presence, and it'll put us on the map in terms of our revenue. Mm-hmm. So it's been we've been through some very challenging times. I like to tell people that when I retire from this position, I'm going to write a book, because some of the chapters are going to be unbelievable.
Well, give us a preview then of some of what you went through, not necessarily in detail of what happened, but I'm curious about your leadership style. Is you're facing some challenges in that CEO role. Sort of what's your thought process on facing a challenge and working through it to get to that other side?
Well, I like to build consensus on my team. I don't like to be a dictatorial leader.
Okay.
So I like to look at the challenge from all different angles and work with my team to build a consensus solution to that challenge and then execute on it. I like to have team members that have a sense of urgency and can act quickly on things. Okay. And so one of the things that when I joined Resources Global Professionals, I distinctly remember the requirements coming through for the director of the Dallas office, which I subsequently went into that role. But one of the main requirements was somebody that had a sense of urgency. Okay. And that stuck with me throughout the rest of my career, and that there are so many people out there that just don't have that sense of urgency.
Right.
I lived in New Orleans for 10 years and worked in that culture.
Yeah,
and
being from there, I know.
You told me you were from there.
Yeah.
Right. And so I've worked in that culture, and there were many people there that did have a sense of urgency in the corporate world, but many people who did not.
Sure.
And so one of the things that I like to really impart upon my team members and the people who work for me is a sense of urgency. Mm-hmm. The other thing that I like to impart upon people that work with me is that long after somebody forgets what you said, they won't forget how you made them feel.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's one of the most important things that I think people can remember in the workplace is people will forget what you said to them, mm-hmm. but they're never going to forget the way you made them feel. So I think if we could all remember that, and just in interacting with each other, that is one of the most important things.
There's a human being on the other side of that conversation.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important to treat people with respect, mm-hmm. and to treat people, to go back to the golden rule, to treat people the way you want to be treated.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there have been times in my career where I've been treated that way, and times in my career where I've absolutely not been treated that way. Mm-hmm. So,
well, I'm very curious about what you're doing today with the Rocky Mountain High brands, and Maybe help us unpack some of the confusion around cannabis, hemp, CBD, marijuana. I mean, there's, I think, a lot of misinformation or misunderstanding around the products that are legal, not legal, and what the process is, and where do you fit in the total cannabis industry?
So there is a lot of confusion, so I appreciate you bringing that up. It's all part of the cannabis family. So if you think of the cannabis family being like the citrus family, so think of hemp and marijuana like an orange and a lime.
Okay.
So an orange and a lime are part of the citrus family, but they're two different types of fruits.
Gotcha.
So cannabis and marijuana, hemp and marijuana are part of the cannabis family, but they're two different types of plants. And the difference is that hemp predominantly produces CBD.
Okay.
And has a minuscule amount of THC in it. Marijuana predominantly produces THC. THC is the compound, I could almost say it, the tetra. I won't even try beyond that.
Google it if you're interested in more about that.
Google THC and you'll see the full name. THC is the compound that gets you high.
Okay.
And that's what causes the confusion, because the two plants look a great deal alike. And you're not going to get high off of products that are created from hemp. So it's understandable why it creates confusion in the marketplace, because if you start at the plant level, the plants look alike. So when they are added into products, it's important for consumers to buy products that are brands.
Okay.
So I would advise consumers to focus on companies that produce brands, because they can have a better reliance on those companies like ours, not to give ourselves a plug, but we are a brand. And there are some fly-by-night bad actors out there that are producing CBD products. One of the things that the U.S. Hemp Roundtable has done, and the U.S. Hemp Roundtable is an organization of different companies that are in every part of the supply chain in the hemp industry. And the U.S. Hemp Roundtable was created to primarily focus on legislation at the federal and state level to legalize hemp and CBD at the federal and state level, as well as to work with the FDA on their regulations to make sure their regulations supported hemp and CBD.
Okay.
So the U.S. Hemp Roundtable formed a sister organization called the U.S. Hemp Authority. And the U.S. Hemp Authority has created a certification process for hemp and CBD companies like ours that we can go through, or have our co-packers go through, that will provide the equivalent of the Good Housekeeping seal of approval. The reason that's important for consumers is that once this stamp becomes recognizable in the marketplace, then consumers can rely on those products meeting certain standards that basically say the amount of CBD that's on the label is actually in that product.
Right.
And that there are manufacturing processes in effect for those manufacturers that fall in line with good manufacturing practices, that the labeling aspects of that company are in line with FDA guidelines. So a consumer can be assured that they're getting a high quality product, and they're spending their money on something that they have a certain comfort level that what they're putting in their body is what they want to be putting in their body.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think that's something that would help alleviate part of the confusion. The other thing that's going to alleviate part of the confusion is when all the laws get into alignment. The Hemp Roundtable is working with the states that haven't passed legislation supporting hemp and CBD. There are 8, I believe, remaining states that have not passed legislation. Texas is in the process of their bills before the legislature. We heard unofficially yesterday that the legislature may have passed a bill, but I haven't heard that on the news yet. I haven't received a notification from the Hemp Roundtable, so I don't know if that's true or not. So I probably shouldn't be saying that since I haven't verified it yet.
We'll say allegedly.
I'll say allegedly. Allegedly. And so the entire goal is to pass legislation at each state's level that will make the laws consistent with the Farm Bill of 2018 so that we have consistent laws between the states. And then to address the FDA concerns of making it legal from an FDA standpoint of adding CBD to food and beverages. And getting the FDA comfortable with whatever framework that they're going to allow for that to happen, whatever process. And they've actually sought input from different companies and different individuals. So they're going through their process. And part of that process may require additional federal legislation to kind of push that forward.
I was just fascinated by the leadership challenge of what he's just saying.
I was just going to ask about that.
You're in the midst of a controversial, if that's the right word, or at least a place where you can do a lot of missteps, and you're trying to build trust in a brand, say a Rocky Mountain brand, right?
Right.
So talk a little bit about the leadership journey there, or the leadership challenges facing in building trust in a brand in a whole industry that has fraught with potential missteps and
government oversights
and things.
It's been challenging. It's one of the things that we've tried to do is to provide education to our consumers on our website that will help build trust in that we know what we're talking about, we know what we're doing, and that we are in compliance with the FDA regulations on what we put on our labeling. We had all of our labeling, all of our social media, and all of our websites reviewed by an FDA attorney. And as a result of that, we made adjustments. So we stick with what's called structure function claims. None of our products have any wild statements like, we don't say our products cure cancer. First of all, we don't know that,
right?
But there are other companies out there that there might be another company out there that would make that statement, and that's the type of company that the FDA is going to go after. And in our industry, that's the type of company that we want the FDA to go after, because that's what we would consider a bad actor.
Gotcha.
And so that's where we want the FDA to police those type of companies, because we don't want you as a consumer to buy a CBD product with the expectation that it's going to cure cancer when we don't know that. We know that it relieves anxiety because it's, several individuals have reported that. But there's not, we haven't conducted a scientific trial to prove that yet. So,
well, it's interesting. We always come back when trust is the issue to competence and how good are you, and then character. Do you do what you say you do?
Right.
And it sounds like that's exactly the way you're trying to lead your company too.
So there is a book that was written by a gentleman named Don Miguel Ruiz. It's called The Four Agreements. Have you ever heard of The Four Agreements?
No.
So the Four Agreements are be impeccable with your word, always do your best, don't make assumptions, and don't take things personally. And I always try and keep the four agreements in mind, that we want to be impeccable with our word and what we're putting out in the marketplace, that we don't want to make any assumptions. As CEO of this company, the hardest one for me to do is not to take things personally, because all I have to do is open Facebook and go to our Rocky Mountain High Facebook page, and I've got some shareholder that's like attacking me on something. And so it's challenging as CEO of this company not to take things personally.
Sure.
When we're trying our best, we're in the midst of a turnaround. We're in a turnaround situation.
Mm-hmm. Well, you preempted our typical last question, which is what is an influential book that you're reading? But I appreciate you doing that. Yeah. So let's talk about how people can find out more about Rocky Mountain High brands and maybe begin to unwrap some of their own confusion of the hemp, marijuana, cannabis, connections.
So our brand website for our CBD products is hempd.com. It's HEMPD.com.
Okay.
And we have a lot of information on CBD and hemp products on that website. Our corporate website is RockyMountainHighBrands.com.
Okay.
Our stock symbol is RMHB, and we are getting ready to file our 10K. We are in the middle of a reverse stock split at the current time, so it should be effective next week. So it's a little bit of an awkward time for our stock right now, but sure, it'll settle down in the next couple of weeks.
And you're an old pro at this podcast circumstance, right? So tell us about your own podcast.
So we do a podcast here. We started out on a weekly basis. We've now done 22. Mm-hmm. It seems odd to be a guest and sit in the chair that I normally host in. But we enjoy doing it. I love this setup here. It's very professional, very comfortable. And I think these guys do a great job with these.
And they can find that on your Facebook page or on your website, link to that?
They can, on our Rocky Mountain High Brands, Inc. Facebook page. And on our corporate website, we post our podcast under our media tab.
Okay, great. Well, it's been a real pleasure having you with us today, learn a little bit about your background and helping to clear the air of some of the confusion around this emerging industry.
Thank you so much. I've enjoyed being here.
Great. And Dr. Blair, we'll turn it back over to you to hear about our leadership trivia.
Yeah, we introduced an astronaut who was part of Apollo 8, Apollo 13, and that astronaut was James Lovell. And great story and a great leader, and these are inspiring times. And a nice shameless plug for Real News there. Nice.
Studios,
nice. Yeah. Just give the studios
great studio.
I need to stop in Jeff's office after this.
Yeah. Well, folks, that's a wrap for our podcast today. On behalf of Dr. Blair Ritchie and myself, Jason Smith, wishing you a good day. And remember this, if your actions inspire others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more, then you are a leader.
Legends in Leadership is brought to you by the Carrington Group. Carrington Group is a family office with a passion for helping business leaders and their families make smart choices and fulfill their highest aspirations. To learn more about the Carrington Group, visit their website at www.carringtonfo.com or Google Carrington Group, Dallas, Texas. ISF is committed to leadership development for aged-out foster care and orphaned youth. ISF's mission is to transform these youth into tomorrow's leaders with scholarships, mentoring, and leadership training. To learn more about ISF, visit their website at isfsite.org or Google International Student Foundation to learn more.
Securities offered through Regulus Advisors, LLC, member FINRA/SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through Regal Investment Advisors, LLC, and SEC-registered investment advisor. Regulus Advisors and Regal Investment Advisors are affiliated entities. Carrington Group and this broadcast are independent of Regulus Advisors and Regal Investment Advisors.